a reclusive billionaire who's never been kissed, a struggling housekeeper hiding heartbreak behind her smile. When Arya Bennett accidentally steps into Dominic Thorne's forbidden world, neither of them expects a simple mistake to ignite a once-in-a-lifetime love. But as passion collides with power, secrets, and sacrifice, Arya must choose between her pride and the man who would give up everything for her. Will love be enough to bridge the worlds between them? Or will fear tear them apart? Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this one. Arya Bennett adjusted the straps of her faded canvas bag as she stood at the wrought iron gates of the Thorne estate, her fingers trembling slightly in the crisp coastal air. The mansion beyond the gate loomed like something out of a dream, or a fairy tale with a dark twist. All glass and stone, perched on the edge of a cliff in Big Sur, it shimmered under the morning sun like a fortress for someone who never wanted to be found. She took a deep breath and walked through when the gates buzzed open. A week ago, she hadn't known this place existed. Now it held the promise of a paycheck big enough to keep her nephew Nico in treatment for another few months. She had no choice but to succeed here. Inside, the house manager, a tall, severe woman named Miranda, led her through the marble halls without much fanfare. "Mr. Thorne values discretion," she said without turning around. "You may never even see him. That's how he prefers it. Do your work, keep your head down, and follow the rules." Arya nodded, absorbing every word. Rule number 1 was clear: never go to the 3rd floor. "Completely off limits," Miranda emphasized. "That's Mr. Thorne's private space. No cleaning, no deliveries, no exceptions." She understood. She'd worked in enough homes to know that rich people had their boundaries. She wasn't here to make friends or ask questions, just to scrub, sweep, and hopefully earn enough to keep Nico's medical bills at bay. Meanwhile, high above her, behind tinted windows, Dominic Thorne stood in his study with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on one of several monitors mounted across the wall. On the screen, Arya moved through the grand foyer, her posture upright but hesitant, her wide eyes taking in the space. He'd known the agency was sending a new hire today, but he hadn't expected someone like her. Whatever that meant. He usually didn't care what they looked like or where they came from. Staff rotated in and out like background noise. But this one, she looked like she'd seen storms and still chosen to walk straight through them. He turned away before he could think too much about it. He didn't need complications. The last time he'd let someone through the walls, real or emotional, they'd carved a hole so deep it nearly consumed him. That hole still echoed years later. Downstairs, Arya found herself in the massive library, more by accident than intention. She was there to dust. Miranda had said to begin in the East Wing, but the books had pulled her in like a whisper. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound volumes, first editions, and novels that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. She gently picked up one with a cracked spine and smiled as she brushed it clean. Without realizing, she began to hum, a soft, lilting tune her mother used to sing when scrubbing the floor back in their old apartment in Oakland. On the monitor, Dominic froze. The sound filtered faintly through the speaker beneath the screen, a melody drifting across the polished silence of his study. No one ever sang here. No one ever dared. Arya finished the library and moved on, unaware of the eyes tracking her from above. She worked steadily, methodically, checking her cheap flip phone during breaks and quickly putting it away. Minutes were precious. When lunch came, she sat by the window, unwrapped a sandwich, and pulled a notepad from her bag. Her brow furrowed as she scribbled calculations, rent, medical bills, grocery lists. She sighed and looked out at the ocean, as if the sea might have answers. Dominic watched all of it, told himself it was just curiosity, told himself it would pass. But when the evening fell and the house emptied, he did something he hadn't done in months. He left his office. He walked the halls. He stood by the kitchen door, just out of view, and listened. Inside, Arya thanked the cook, graciously accepting a container of leftover pasta. "This'll save me a trip to the store," she said with a small smile. "Thank you." "No problem," the cook replied. "Mr. Thorne makes us throw it out anyway." Dominic leaned back into the shadows. He should have been angry. She was taking food. But instead, he found himself wondering why she needed to. 3 days into her new job, Arya found herself in the garden just after sundown, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, not for the cold, but for the weight that had finally cracked her calm exterior. In one hand she held a letter, creased, damp with earlier tears, an official eviction notice from her landlord. 30 days to vacate. No more extensions, no more mercy. She had tried everything, delayed every bill, cut every corner. The job at the Thorne estate had come too late to stop this. Her nephew's medication took priority. Always. She sat on a stone bench tucked beneath the weeping branches of a twisted tree, letting her silent sobs shake her shoulders while trying to make no sound. The mansion lights behind her glowed faintly through the hedges, indifferent and far away. In the corner of her mind, she knew it wasn't wise to cry here. Someone might see. But she was too exhausted to care. Someone did see. Dominic watched from his office, hands clenched tightly at his sides. The security feed had pinged an alert, movement in the garden. When he pulled it up, he hadn't expected to see her, Arya, alone, crumpled in a way that hurt to witness. She looked so small there, the paper in her hand trembling. The camera's zoom function brought the words into focus. Notice to vacate. He turned away too quickly, like the pain on her face had struck him physically. Something in him stirred, a sensation long buried. Pity? No, it wasn't that. Recognition. That familiar panic of a life spinning out of control. He remembered what it felt like to be 10 years old and told the power would be shut off if the bill wasn't paid by morning. He remembered the shame. And then he remembered the promise he'd made to himself back then. Never again. He would have so much money one day, the world would never touch him. Now someone else was being touched by that same world. The next morning, Arya stared at her phone like it had grown teeth. Her landlord had called while she was folding linens in the laundry room. His voice was almost apologetic. "There's been a payment," he said, 6 months in advance, from a third party, anonymous. She stood frozen, the call still echoing in her ears. There was only one person who could have done it. Only one person who had seen her in the garden. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with confusion. Why? Why would Dominic Thorne, who had barely spoken to her, do something so generous, so intimate without saying a word? Later that afternoon, carrying fresh towels to the second-floor guest suites, Arya took a wrong turn. The hallways in this house all looked the same, symmetrical, sterile, endless. She realized her mistake too late, just as her hand pushed open the wrong door. The room was dim and smelled faintly of cedar. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sea, casting blue light onto the floor. A man stood by the window, barefoot, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and dark pants. Not polished, not ready for company. Dominic turned sharply. Their eyes met. Arya gasped, nearly dropping the towels. "I'm so sorry," she said, stepping back. "I got lost. I didn't mean to." "You're the new housekeeper," he said softly, almost like he was confirming it to himself. She nodded, unsure if she should run or apologize again. He didn't move. "Was it enough?" She blinked. "What? The rent money? Was it enough?" Her cheeks flushed, her voice caught in her throat. "It was you." Dominic looked back out the window. "I saw you crying. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. It just felt wrong to do nothing." The silence between them thickened, not uncomfortable, just full of things neither knew how to say. Arya should have turned and walked away. She'd broken the one rule of the house, his privacy, but something about the moment rooted her in place. "You don't have to be alone all the time," she said gently, surprising even herself. His shoulders tensed. When he turned, his expression was raw and honest in a way that made her breath hitch. "I don't know how not to be," he admitted. And just like that, something shifted. A fracture in the glass fortress, a beginning neither of them could have predicted. Arya stood still in the greenhouse, her hands clasped in front of her, the scent of jasmine and fresh soil thick in the air. Dominic had summoned her here, though "summoned" felt like too harsh a word for the simple note she'd found tucked into her cleaning cart earlier that day. It had only said, "Greenhouse, 5 p.m. if you want to." That last part had softened it, made her pulse flutter in confusion and anticipation. Through the glass, she watched Dominic bent over a row of white orchids, checking a clipboard. He looked so different outside his polished world. His black t-shirt was rumpled, his jeans worn, his feet in old sneakers. There was dirt on his hands. When he noticed her standing in the doorway, he nearly dropped the clipboard. His face lit up, like her presence genuinely surprised and pleased him. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Dominic ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was coming to recognize as his tell for discomfort. "I thought maybe you'd have regrets about the other night." "Do you?" she asked, stepping closer, letting her eyes drift over the rows of carefully tended plants. "About the kiss?" "No." He said it too fast, too certain. I've never felt anything like that before." Arya smiled gently, unsure if she felt flattered or overwhelmed. "I've never kissed a billionaire in a storm before. I expected more lightning bolts." He chuckled, that same rusty, surprised sound she'd heard by the fireplace. "Next time, I'll try to arrange something more cinematic." She arched a brow. "Next time?" His gaze steadied on hers. "That's not why I asked you here." "Well, not only. I wanted to show you something." He led her to a small section in the back corner of the greenhouse. It was cordoned off, a little sanctuary filled with her favorite flowers, white gardenias blooming in neat rows under soft golden grow lights. Her breath caught. She hadn't even realized she'd mentioned them aloud. "Martha said these were your favorite," he explained. "I thought maybe this could be your space, somewhere peaceful, just for you." Arya blinked hard, overwhelmed. "No one's ever done something like this for me." "It's nothing," he said quickly, "just dirt and petals." But they both knew it wasn't. It was a gesture that cost nothing and meant everything. It was him, opening a door he'd kept bolted shut for most of his adult life. She touched one of the blooms gently. "Thank you," she whispered. When their fingers brushed a moment later, Dominic startled slightly, like even that innocent contact still surprised him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer. "May I?" he asked, his eyes drifting to her lips. Arya nodded. The kiss this time wasn't hesitant. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, his lips warm and unsure, but hungry with something deeper than desire, need. Decades of isolation melted into the tender pressure of that kiss. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said, almost helplessly. "I've never felt this way about anyone." "We'll figure it out together," she promised, though a part of her deep down trembled with the fear she was stepping onto a path with no map. Days turned into weeks, and Dominic began to change. The staff whispered about it. He appeared in hallways where he never used to tread. He started eating breakfast in the dining room instead of behind his screens. He said good morning. Arya noticed the way he paused when she passed, the way he left books on her cart with notes in the margins. Once, he even accompanied her to the hospital to visit Nico, his baseball cap pulled low, clearly uncomfortable, but determined to be there. "You didn't have to come," she told him outside the hospital. "I wanted to," he said. "I wanted to meet someone who matters to you." Later, Nico would whisper to her, "Is that the guy who makes video games for adults?" Arya had laughed, brushing a hand over his head. "Something like that." But even as things deepened, a shadow hovered at the edges, a sense that the world wouldn't let them stay in this quiet place forever. And she wasn't wrong, because somewhere in a conference room uptown, Dominic's name was being whispered. Not as a genius this time, but as a man distracted. A man in love. A man whose empire might no longer be his priority. Arya heard the voices before she realized what room she had entered. She had just finished organizing the linen closet on the second floor when the door to Dominic's private study, usually shut tight, had been left slightly ajar. She hadn't meant to listen. But when she heard her name, when she heard the way they said it, she couldn't move. "The board is concerned, Dominic," came a voice sharp with practiced authority. "You're missing meetings, changing product deadlines without approval. And there are rumors." Dominic's voice was cool, defensive. "I don't answer to the board, Richard. I own the company." "Yes," Richard replied tightly, "but even founders can lose control when shareholders start asking questions, especially when the press finds out about the housekeeper." The word hit Arya like a slap. Not her name, not even employee, just the housekeeper. "My personal life is none of the board's concern," Dominic said, voice dark now, clipped. "It is when it affects our bottom line. You think investors want to see headlines like, 'Billionaire tech mogul falls for the help'?" Arya backed away, her hands trembling. She didn't hear the rest. She didn't need to. The walls she thought they'd been tearing down together suddenly felt like they'd only existed in her head. To the rest of the world, she was just another woman who had crossed the invisible line between servant and scandal. That evening, she waited in the greenhouse, the place that had once felt like theirs. It no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like goodbye. When Dominic finally arrived, his face lit up the second he saw her, but it faded just as fast when she didn't smile. "I've been looking for you," he said, stepping toward her. Arya didn't move. "I heard you, this morning, with Richard." Dominic's expression fell. "Arya, the agency wants to reassign me," she interrupted, her voice steady, though her chest felt like it was splintering. "Because of us." "I won't let them," he said immediately. "I'll talk to them." "And then what?" she asked, her voice rising. "I'd become the housekeeper who sleeps with the boss? The girl who traded integrity for comfort? You know what they'll call me, Dominic. I've heard it before." "You're not that," he said, his tone firm. "No one who knows you would ever believe that." "The world doesn't know me," she snapped. "They just see you, and they'll see me the way they want to." He stepped forward, reaching for her, but she folded her arms tightly, holding herself together. "I have a life, Dominic. A nephew who needs me to keep this job. I can't afford scandal. I can't afford whispers that follow me into every future application. I told you I'd take care of everything." "I don't want to be taken care of," she said, tears rising despite her best efforts. "Don't you see? I need to stand on my own. I need to be your equal, not your problem to fix." Dominic looked gutted. "Is that what you think this is? That I'm just trying to rescue you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I think maybe, for both of us, this moved too fast. You've never even had a real relationship before, Dominic. What if this is just the thrill of something new?" "Don't do that," he said, his voice low and broken. "Don't reduce this to some impulsive fling. I've never wanted anyone else. Not like this. Not ever." Her heart twisted. She believed him. That made it worse. "I need time," she whispered, "to think." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly, like she had physically knocked the air from his lungs. "Whatever you need." The next day the call came. The agency's voice was polite, apologetic, even complimentary, but firm. She was being reassigned. A new client, a new home, effective immediately. She packed quietly, not trusting herself to say goodbye. Instead, she left a note among the gardenias in the greenhouse. "Dominic, I'm sorry. This is for the best. What we had was beautiful, but it wasn't real life. You deserve someone from your world. I need to find my own. Please don't try to contact me. Take care of yourself. Arya." As the car pulled away from the estate and the sea disappeared behind her, Arya bit her lip so hard it bled. She'd done the sensible thing. The smart thing. The only thing she could do. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? Weeks passed like faded photographs, dull, colorless, and slow. Arya tried to focus on her new job with the Farnsworth family, a position that came with better hours and less emotional weight. The house was lovely, the family polite, but everything felt sterile. She went through the motions, cleaning, organizing, smiling when expected. But at night, in her small apartment, the silence felt heavier than ever. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart would lurch, only to sink again when it was never him. Dominic had respected her wish. No messages, no calls, not a single sign. "You look awful," Nico said one evening over dinner, his big brown eyes full of concern as he pushed a piece of broccoli across his plate. "Like a zombie." Arya smiled weakly. "Thanks, sweetheart. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." "I'm just saying, you used to laugh more." She didn't have the heart to tell him why. She barely had the heart to admit it to herself. Later that night, Jenny, her sister, FaceTimed her from the hospital. "You okay?" Jenny asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "You've been weird." "I'm fine," Arya lied, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't taken a sip from. Jenny squinted through the screen. "This is about him, isn't it? The recluse billionaire with the tragic backstory and the eyes that practically scream, 'I need a hug.'" Arya tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. "I left. He's probably moved on. Probably designing some genius software in a fortress filled with robotic assistants and zero feelings." Jenny tilted her head. "Really? Because according to the business section, he's off the radar. Canceled public appearances. Missed his product launch. Stock prices dropped 10%. You sure he's fine?" Arya's mug froze halfway to her lips. "What?" Jenny turned her phone around and pulled up an article. Dominic Thorne in seclusion, genius or breakdown. Arya scanned the words, her stomach nodding. He's probably just busy, she muttered, not believing herself. Jenny leaned closer. Look, sis, I get it. You wanted your pride, your independence, but I'm not buying that this is over. You look miserable. He looks miserable. If this isn't love, then it's the best imitation I've ever seen. That night, Arya sat on her tiny balcony, watching the distant glow of the city, Dominic's name still in her contacts, untouched. Her thumb hovered over it. She whispered into the wind. What would I even say? Meanwhile, miles away, Dominic sat alone in the greenhouse, surrounded by gardenias that refused to bloom since she left. He stared at old security footage, Arya laughing, humming, pausing to admire the ocean through the window. He knew it was pathetic. But he couldn't stop. A knock sounded at the door. Go away. He called out. It opened anyway. Richard stepped in, dressed sharp as always, but with a softened look. Jesus, Dom. When was the last time you showered? Dominic closed the laptop. What do you want? The board sent me to make sure you weren't dead. I'm alive, clearly. Richard sat studying him. This is about her, isn't it? Dominic didn't answer. You gave up, Richard said quietly. You, the guy who negotiated a $200 million deal with a fever and 2 cracked ribs. She asked me not to contact her. She asked for space. That's not the same as giving up. I respect her choice. Richard shook his head. You know, for a genius, you're remarkably dumb sometimes. The words stuck. Later that night, Dominic made a call, not to Arya, but to Jenny. How did you get this number? She demanded. I own a tech company, he replied flatly. Please, I want to talk about your treatment. 2 days later, Jenny sat across from him at a quiet cafe, arms crossed. Let me guess, you created a foundation for chronic care patients, and magically I qualify? Dominic nodded. You and hundreds of others. But yes, you were the inspiration. You're doing this to win Arya back. I'm doing this because I made a promise to her. Jenny softened. She misses you. She just doesn't know how to come back. Neither do I, he admitted. But fate had its own ideas. The next morning, Arya was told by her employers that they no longer needed her. Her position had been reassigned due to family adjustments. Hours later, her landlord informed her the rent had been paid in full through next year. Confused, she checked her phone. A message from an unknown number blinked on her screen. The orchids miss you. I do too. Then another. I'm in the greenhouse, if you want to talk. She stared at the words, her heart thudding wildly. For weeks, she'd been trying to forget him. But suddenly, she couldn't remember why she ever tried. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it comes quietly, through acts of kindness, shared silence, and the bravery to let someone see the parts of you you've spent years hiding. Dominic and Arya's story reminds us that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's a doorway. A doorway to healing, to change, and to something real. It's easy to build walls when life has taught you that closeness means pain. But healing begins the moment we let someone in, even just a little. Dominic, a man who had everything money could buy but nothing that truly mattered, found peace not in power or isolation, but in Arya's quiet strength. And Arya, burdened by the weight of responsibility and fear of judgment, learned that love isn't about dependence. It's about partnership, about walking side by side through the storms and the stillness. This story teaches us that true love doesn't demand perfection. It asks only for honesty, for effort, and for the courage to choose each other. Again and again, even when it's hard. No matter how broken your past is, no matter how high your walls may seem, someone out there sees the real you, and might just be brave enough to love you because of it. Where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments, I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. There's always more heart, hope, and healing waiting for you right here.